Andy Warhol was a talented artist and probably pretty unhinged, and he said something that would become just as famous as some of his creations. He said that in the future, everyone will be world famous for 15 minutes. Today, the story is about a man who was in search of his 15 minutes. It may not have been his motive, but when the opportunity to grab the spotlight came, he definitely stepped into it. Welcome to 10-Minute Murder, brief and bingeable true crime. I'm Joe, the host, and thank you for joining today. A quick PSA to you listening to the sound of my voice right now. If you reach out and contact me, you are not bugging me, like at all. In the daily messages that I get on a variety of subjects from so many of you that listen, some of you start off by saying, hey, sorry to bug you, but let me be clear. Hearing from you in no way, shape, or form bugs me. It's actually just the opposite. I wish you would try to bug me. And that's how I hear about so many of the stories that I tell you in this podcast, including the one today. You are curating the subject of the content on 10-Minute Murder. I mean, not to toot my own horn or anything, but I then do the hard part of gathering the information and then presenting it in a brief and bingeable form. But it starts with you reaching out to me, so please never feel like you're bugging me. You guys are great, and you can keep reaching out as much as you want to. Before we get going with your story today, this is your reminder to subscribe to 10-Minute Murder if you're new to this podcast. You'll always be able to find it and never miss an episode. Connect with 10-Minute Murder on social media. If you have friends that also like brief and bingeable true crime stories, please let them know about this podcast. Links are in the show notes of this episode, as well as at 10minutemurder.com. Now, to the story. Around 5:30 p.m. on May 18, 2018, a passing car and a UPS truck stopped near a creek in Camptown, Pennsylvania, to check out what they believed to be a body. When they realized it was, in fact, the body of an obviously dead lady, they called the police to let them know what was going on and to get them down there ASAP. They found the body of 60-year-old Patricia Haverly. Initial investigations indicated that she had been violently murdered. Police quickly identified Matthew, her son, as the primary suspect, as he was the only person present in the home at the time of the murder. Like most local media in small towns, when something happens, they get wind of it. Big or small, they swarm, especially if it's a particularly small town and the reporters have gotten a little sick of covering city council meetings and other boring stories. Obviously, they have a duty to report the news, so I'm sure that's always their goal, but as we know, they can get overzealous, sensationalize things, and lose sight that the victims in the stories that they're reporting are actual people and deserve respect. I'm not saying that this is what happened in this particular case, because it didn't happen in this case. But it's very common in these stories for me to come across. There's a vulture-like reporting. And I will tell you that I've worked in a couple of small-town news stations in the past, distant past, and some, not all, of the people that come through those places are not good people. But to be clear, I did not see that in this story, just thought it was worth mentioning. Anyway, thanks for coming to my TED Talk about bad news reporting. And by the way, there are some very, very good ones out there, and I'm sure you've seen that to be true. In pursuit of interesting information from the residents of Camptown, the local media descended upon the region. At that point, Matthew Haverly moved forward, made himself visible. After all, it was in the creek across from where he and his mother lived that the body of the lady was found, the identity of which had not been released at that time. Matthew stood in front of the water, baggy t-shirt and baggy gym shorts hanging past his knees, a shaved mohawk seemingly trying to hide his premature balding. I'll post the link to watch this interview on the 10-Minute Murder Facebook page, but Matthew started telling the news station that he was unaware of what was happening until he heard what the authorities had discovered. The reporter listened as he made a wild guess as to why there had been a body left in the creek, suggesting that it may have been a hit gone wrong. He appeared surprised that this could happen in this tranquil rural neighborhood. Maybe feigning empathy, he highlighted the obvious, that the victim was someone's mother or daughter.
Newswatch 16's Christina Papa interviewed Matthew Haverly after a woman's body was discovered in a creek near Camptown. Haverly gave the impression he didn't have any idea what was going on.
I'm like, what the hell's going on? And now I realize that's what they were actually doing. I had no clue.
Later, the same day as the interview, investigators identified the woman found in the creek as 60-year-old Patricia Haverly. Her son didn't even hint toward knowing it was her.
It's sad to say that that's someone's either daughter, mother, whatever, both, child.
So when Haverly mentioned it could be someone's mother, it turned out it was his own mother. But during his interview with Newswatch 16, he said he thought it was someone from out of town.
I think it was kind of a hit, and something happened. Something went bad, and this is like a rural area, so they just wanted to plant the body somewhere else besides wherever the hell they were from.
Haverly lives across the street from where the body was found. When Newswatch 16 asked him again what he thought, Haverly continued to talk about mob or gang-related killings.
It would be like a place where people from the city would want to put a body because most likely they wouldn't be found.
Haverly also spoke about his mother's possible reaction to troopers finding a body near their home.
I'm guessing like my mother, she would be concerned. And probably a lot of the other neighbors would be concerned.
Haverly was right about his neighbors being concerned, especially when police identified the woman as his own mother and arrested Haverly later in the day for her death.
It's heartbreaking because he comes across concerned, and that's what's scary is because you don't know what's going on next door at your neighbor's house.
Yeah, that's kind of weird. That's kind of weird. You got people like that running around. Not good.
Patricia had lived in Camptown her entire life, having been born and raised there. She spent more than 30 years as a lab tech for DuPont before retiring. Patty, as she was called by her family, enjoyed gardening and spending time with her granddaughter that she absolutely adored, named Isabella. Matthew Haverly admitted to the authorities that he and his mother did not get along very well. They would often argue about various things and said that they had a long and disagreeable relationship. They didn't get along, but somehow she allowed him, being in his late 30s, to still live in her house. He said that the two got into another dispute the day she turned up in the creek, dead, but this time the dispute was violent. Patty allegedly attempted to strike Matthew after a heated exchange between the two of them. After holding her by the arms, she passed out. After that, he was unable to remember anything. That's his story of events. The authorities discovered a black tarp that matched the one seen at the crime site when searching the Haverly residence. They also found a set of brass knuckles in his room, though the investigators believe that no weapon was used in the murder. Matthew did not admit guilt to killing his mother. This form of no contest plea typically indicates that the defendant does not recall committing the crime but acknowledges that there is sufficient evidence to establish guilt. Additionally, he was accused of mistreating a corpse and interfering with the evidence. Haverly was charged with second-degree murder, and the case quickly went to trial. At trial, the prosecution argued that Matthew had acted with premeditation and intent, and had been motivated by a desire to inherit his mother's estate. The defense argued that Matthew acted in self-defense and that the killing had been an accident. Ultimately, the jury found Matthew guilty of second-degree murder. He was ordered to pay $250,000 in restitution and was sentenced to only 3.5 to 14 years in prison.